So imagine a law that's been around for more than 150 years, a real piece of history, just getting wiped off the books overnight. Well, that's exactly what happened in India. We're going to dive into the story of how its Supreme Court struck down a really old colonial-era law on adultery. It's a fascinating one.
At the very heart of this whole thing is a single, powerful question. In this day and age, can a law actually treat one person as the property of another? Just let that sink in. Keep that question in your mind because, honestly, it's the key to understanding everything we're about to talk about.
All right, so what exactly was this old law? We've got to look at something called Section 497 of the Indian Penal Code. And, as we get into it, you'll see it really feels like a relic from a totally different time.
So what did this law actually say? Get this. It made it a crime for a man to have sex with a married woman without her husband's permission. Yeah, you heard that right. The woman involved, she committed no crime. The entire offense was based on whether her husband consented or not. It's pretty wild.
And that brings us straight to the core of the problem, right? The entire law was just built on this idea of deep, fundamental inequality. So let's break down exactly how it was so discriminatory.
I mean, the power imbalance was just stark. A husband could take the man his wife had an affair with to criminal court. But a wife? Nope, she had no right to do the same. She couldn't prosecute the woman her husband was with. The law basically treated her like she was his property. The crime wasn't seen as a betrayal of her trust, but as a violation of his ownership.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. The Supreme Court itself said it plain as day in their judgment. They said the law was unconstitutional because, and I'm quoting here, it treats a husband as the master. That one word, master, it just says everything you need to know about the worldview that was baked into this old law. So, this outdated way of thinking was finally, and I mean finally, challenged in a huge case back in 2018. It's known as Joseph Shine versus the Union of India. And this case, well, it was the one that changed everything. The argument they brought before the court was refreshingly direct. The challengers basically said, look, Section 497 isn't just old-fashioned, it's flat-out unconstitutional. They argued that it smashed right through the fundamental rights to equality, non-discrimination, and personal liberty that are guaranteed to every single citizen in India.
Okay, so the arguments were heard, the history was all laid out, and the constitutional principles were debated. The big question is, what did India's highest court decide to do?
The verdict was unanimous, and it was absolutely historic. The Supreme Court struck down Section 497. Gone. Just like that, adultery was no longer a crime in India. Now, it can still be grounds for a divorce, sure, that's a civil matter, but it would no longer land anyone in a criminal court.
Now, the verdict itself is a huge deal, but the reasoning behind it, that's where the real power is. So let's dig into the constitutional arguments. Why specifically did the court say this law was so fundamentally broken?
The court's entire reasoning really stood on three massive pillars of the Indian Constitution. The law was found to violate Article 14, which is the right to equality, Article 15, which prohibits discrimination based on sex, and Article 21, the fundamental right to life and personal liberty.
Okay, so let's break it down. First, by giving husbands all the rights and wives none, the law obviously failed the equality and non-discrimination tests. That's pretty clear. But second, and this is maybe the deeper point, by treating a woman like property, the law literally stripped her of her dignity and her personal freedom, which is the entire point of the right to life and liberty.
So really, the crucial point is this. The Supreme Court's decision sent a crystal clear message. A woman's dignity, her autonomy, her right to be seen as an equal person under the law, those things are non-negotiable. They are way more important than some outdated social custom that treats her as less than.
And all of this brings us to one final lingering question. The legal fight is over, right? A 158-year-old law is gone. But it raises a much bigger question for society. A court can overturn a law in a single day. But how long does it take to change the mindset that created that law in the first place? And that's the conversation that's still going on in India today.